Good afternoon and welcome to you all. I suppose, David, first, I welcome what you have indicated there in your opening statement. And I mean, the fact that so many of the unions as part of your organisation are displaying more awareness of autism and actually addressing it, because I just really think that sometimes a lack of awareness or an ignorance breeds fear. And you talk about passport systems, so I'd love you just to expand on that, because the previous speaker in here in the morning session, we were talking about assistive technology and how it should follow a child from primary school right through to secondary school, right through to college and on to work, obviously being updated and amended as needed, and that doesn't always happen. And we've had people in before who've talked about receiving reasonable accommodation in their workplace, but then if they change workplace, they have to reapply again. So would your passport scheme just work within one place where there's a change of role, or are you talking about it following people if they change employer and go to a different employment? And also, I suppose, you indicate that Section 16 of the Employment Equality Act obliges employers to provide reasonable accommodations, but sometimes I find with employers that they prefer to avoid employing autistic people or disabled people in general, even though there are reasonable accommodations there, because they just think it's easier to employ someone without a disability. They're obviously missing out on a lot of talent by doing that. But it's just to try and get through to people as well, to employers, that, there's autistic people and all the talents they have and what they could actually bring to an employment place. I suppose then, Peter, the work that you do, I suppose a few questions there, just how it all works. First of all, are you nationwide? And also, I know you have increased the number of people that you've helped over the years, and you have used 200, you say now, looking for assistance. Are there others looking for assistance that you're not in a position to help due to lack of resources? And I know you've indicated that the funding is not multi-annual and it needs to be and should be. Also, I mean, candidates apply to you for assistance. Do companies come to you looking for people, or do you reach out to companies? Just how that actually works to join people on. And I suppose as well, the people you've helped to gain employment, is it sustainable? Have you data on people? Do they stay in that employment long term, or is it, is there a big turnover in staff? Thank you.
Yeah, well, effectively what we do from the candidate point of view is we do a deep assessment with them to find out what they can do and what they want to do, because it's all voluntary. People come to us, so there is no charge or anything like that for the candidates, as we said, and we're not talking about a specific job role at the time. But obviously we're starting to think it might be, the typical areas would be IT, finance, the sciences, often, but sometimes we get people who, we've got two working in PR, for example, so it's right across the board. And the majority of people that we work with are autistic, so that to make that clear. So what we do, we give them the confidence to do then interview process. We also, at the same time, are talking to the company, so the interview panel will know about the person that's coming and what maybe accommodation socially in the interview system. The company will be briefed by us, sort of awareness effort, particularly the local people. Then we have a buddy system, like a lot of people would have a buddy system. And if they like a particular person out of a number of CVs that we might have put up for particular roles that they have, then what we do is, and they gain employment, just before they start, we'd also brief the local co-workers on what you need to do to support this person. In other words, it's all about disclosure at some level that's required. In other words, if a person doesn't like the canteen, then because of the noise, say, then the co-workers know that, and they'll be supportive if they disappear off to have their lunch by themselves or whatever. It's not being antisocial, it's just they need to do that, or if they need to sit beside the window or whatever it is. And they are really, the co-workers then become supporters to the buddy as well. But all the time, we put a dedicated person onto that particular candidate of ours who's in the company. And once they settle down after the so-called onboarding period, then we would be checking in on a very regular basis. Particularly COVID drove it sort of more than once a month to almost once a week in that supporting role and being retained. And we have some people we're still supporting after 9 years, so you can imagine. But now most go off and become independent. And actually now we're reaching a new point where it's about career development, because a lot of people have sort of reached a sort of a glass ceiling in some companies because they maybe didn't have the qualifications yet, they had the intelligence to do the job, and there's all that type of thing as well. We're having a lot of success this year on that with some of our older companies. On company referrals, it comes in all different ways. One company, typically what happens, you get flag bearers for us in one company who talks to another company, and they get on to us. So from a company point of view, it's gaining talent, and yes, there are some charges around it. So but that's the logical thing to do, because if they're clever enough and with our support, they can gain, for example, the wage subsidy support scheme or whatever. So there's something good there. And typically, anyway, we would match a lot of the rates that recruiters have anyway. We are, by the way, we have to be a legal body there as well. So the company referrals come in all different ways. Sometimes it's just a person who has somebody who is challenged with some disability. It doesn't necessarily have to be autism, and they understand. Particularly if it's a top man, it just happens, you know. But then it's often in HR or somebody just down who's one of the senior managers. And your last question on retention, our people tend to stay longer because they're so happy to have the job. As a generalisation, that's not fair. But also some, particularly lately, who are trying to develop their careers, we have helped them move to another company, or more preferably, obviously, is to grow within the company that they're in. And that has happened very successfully this year with 3 people. 2 have stayed and 1 has left. And that's life, you know. One guy was headhunted by another company. But what can we do, you know? So,
on the passport scheme, this is an idea that actually originated in the UK. And within the trade union movement there, and we kind of adopted it for use here, and we're very pleased to agree a broad approach with IBEC on the scheme, because we felt that would be more powerful if we had the employers on board right from the start. So essentially, they're designed for people who require adjustments in order to, you know, carry out their work, and it's a written record of the accommodations agreed between the person and their line manager. So, you know, it allows time for an employee to, I suppose, explain what are the kind of changes or adjustments they might need in order to perform their role, you know, efficiently and productively. It might also explain the barriers they encounter, so everyone understands, you know, the reason for these, etc. And also for a review, because obviously people's conditions and change, you know, over time. So. And the advantage of this is that while the passport is an agreement between a person and their line manager, so if the line manager changes or the person's role changes, you know, there is this passport, you know, that they have that shows what has been negotiated and agreed with previous line manager, etc. In terms of moving employments entirely, so there is nothing, I mean, it's not a statutory scheme, so it's just an agreement at workplace level. But I do think it would be really useful for a person moving employment to have the record with them. Perhaps the employment they're moving to has the scheme in place, but even if they don't, it is a really useful document to carry with them. And if you like, you know, shortens that conversation, so it will actually, you know, I have a record here of what's required, and this is what was agreed in my last workplace. Can we talk about something similar here, etc. You know, so that's how the scheme would work.
In response to Deputy Tully's question in relation to reasonable accommodation, I think, you know, in disability and employment context, reasonable accommodation is something which has been around for quite some time, but raising awareness of it, I think, has been a difficulty. And one of the gaps that has been identified in the employment strategy for people with disabilities is the matter of information for employers and employers having access to information and an information service. And I think that's really important in this context. Reasonable accommodation is not about, you know, an employer having to take somebody on who's not able to do the job. It's about, you know, kind of the things that can be done within the employment to ensure that the person can make a contribution and, you know, access meaningful work, which I think we'd all agree is something that is, you know, kind of really important for every person, whether they're a person with a disability or without. In terms of the kinds of reasonable accommodation that a person with disability, with autism might look at, I suppose if you look at the characteristics that are associated with autism, like for example in the areas of social interaction, communication style and behavioural patterns, you know, when you become aware of, the first thing I suppose is to be aware of the needs that, the additional needs that people with autism bring, and then to fit, you know, kind of to that person's needs and to see if that can be reasonably accommodated within the workplace through the changes in routine or, for example, a more targeted communication style through job matching, ensuring that the person is in a job, you know, kind of that matches their abilities. Because one of the things I think is really important to say is that there are many strengths and talents that people who are neurodivergent people or people with autism can bring into the workplace, such as their attention to detail, you know, their ability to, you know, kind of stay with a task, to become, you know, kind of their, you know, kind of, and this is associated with a lot of people with disability who are in employment, very strong attendance patterns, you know, kind of, so people, you know, kind of really valuing their job, and so, you know, kind of a lot of very hard-working, intensely focused people with autism working. And if the accommodations can be made that bring them in, I think that's, you know, kind of, that's hugely, and if employers can become aware first of all of the needs, and secondly of how they can reasonably accommodate those differences within the workplace.